So, hey, welcome to Meizon Mission. I'm Kevin. This is Levi. And we're going to try something a little different this week. As you all know, Meizon Mission is about creating spaces for people to hear and experience the good news of Jesus. We're an inclusive faith community. And this last weekend, we had our first meeting of the year. And so I figured maybe we start by talking about that.
Yeah, why not? I mean, how can we not talk about it? It's been a long time coming. It wasn't like we just, hey, let's try to do this thing. There's been kind of a grind for over a year, and we've done all the things. We've met in the public parks. We met in the parking lot in an industrial park. And then finally, in a casual conversation one day with a friend, Mike Evans, he mentioned, hey, have you thought about working with this brewery? They have an events room. And we were like, what the heck? And man, you sent an email. I kind of took over from there, and it was just like boom, boom, boom. And it happened. Yeah. And so we set it up. We put out like 80 chairs and kind of hoped that some people would come. Yeah.
And I think there was that moment, like we were getting going. And, because everything's a mad dash, whenever you do these set up, tear down church things, it's like, your head's in the game. You're like, all right, we're setting up chairs, we're setting up pipe and drape, we're setting up the band, getting the sound going, doing the lights. And so you don't have time to really stop and like take in what's going on around you. And there was a moment, it was about like probably 15 minutes before we started the service. And I just kind of made eye contact with you and I looked around and I'm like, there's like a lot of people here.
Yes. Yeah. It was funny because Mort Vineyard, the Vineyards have been with us since we began this thing. And he told me, we had a conversation afterwards. He's sitting there and there's pretty much nobody there. And it's, 10, 15 minutes before. And he told me, he's like, I was feeling so bad for you and Kevin. He was like, you guys are going to be so disappointed. And I walked up to him and I said, this place is going to be packed. And he said, I thought you were out of your mind, but I had already seen like 3 families that I didn't know were going to be there. And I knew basically who was going to be there. And I was like, man, this thing, it's going to be full. And it was, dude. Like, I think at one point when all of the kids were still in with us, we didn't have a single empty seat. I don't think so.
No. It was, because when worship was over, I went to go find a seat and I ended up sitting on the floor in the back of the room because there were no seats in the front. So
right, yeah. And I'd had a conversation with our children's director, Charlotte, and she's like, she said, I went ahead and prepared for 20 kids, thinking that's probably double what we would have. And she told me that she ended up with 26 kids that went back there. And there were actually a couple that stayed in with their parents. So like we were pretty close to just 30 kids, And, at the end of the day, if we just had a full room and that's all we were talking about, you can fill a room, right?
Well, and I think there was also this sort of anxiety that you and I were both having. Because, like, honestly, and I think whenever you listen to me or Levi, you're going to get the real. You're going to get the real. So here's the real. The real is COVID, right? COVID is the elephant in the room. It's the thing that has kept us from meeting inside for over a year. Right. We launched this thing in the middle of a pandemic. Every time we met, because we were trying to keep people safe and we're trying to just honor people in this whole weird season that we're in. And then I remember the week before, if you don't know, COVID numbers are, skyrocketing right now again. And
Omicron.
It was just like, and we were just like, are you kidding me?
Right. Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah, because we were poised to try to make this move indoor back in the summer, and that's when Delta went nuts in Florida, and we just had we had to say no, and then we did watch this one, and yes, the infection numbers are way up, but like the deaths and hospitalizations, especially among people who have been double vaccinated and boosted, it's pretty low. I was talking to a friend yesterday who had Delta. And then has got this one too.
Oh no!
And they're like, "Hey, I'd take this one 10 times." So that it has a little bit different feel. I mean, we're taking it seriously, but we we were like, well, we just have to do this. But we did have that thought
But
in the back
it's
of our
hard
head.
because
Yes.
it's like, you know, we literally have been wrestling with that issue since our existence. And sure enough, in the very first meeting of the year, here it comes rearing its head again to kind of like try to take the wind out of the sails. And I was still really encouraged by that, because that was the other thing, is like we could have still met inside, but like numbers could have been low because people were hesitant to come out or people weren't sure. And the one cool thing that I thought was great was we set up that speaker outside so that there could be a space for some people who wanted to come. They could still go to the food trucks. They could still get a drink because everything's kind of open air at Cypress and Grove. And so it was cool to be able to offer that to some people who were maybe a little bit hesitant to come inside. But, you know, just trying to make those ways for people so that they feel comfortable. It's just been really, it's been good, but it's also been really challenging.
Oh, yeah, totally. Any feedback you've gotten? Like, have you had like...
I mean, most of the feedback that I've gotten has been really positive. People seem to be excited, and I'm seeing people who are reacting to seeing kind of the pictures, because we had our friend Bill came by and took some great pictures.
Bill Thompson, dude.
And they were awesome. And so he posted those online. I haven't even gotten the finished pictures because I know there's even more.
I know, like I totally sniped. Like he posted some. I was like, I can't wait. Like we got to push some of this out there, right?
Yeah. And so you know, he was there taking some great pictures, and he posted some on social media. And I'm already seeing people talking about like next month. I can't wait to you know, I missed the first one, but I'll be at the next one.
Right.
Like, so I think it's exciting that there's people who see what we're doing, and there's a lot of excitement, both from people who experienced the first one and people who are just seeing what we're doing, and they're like, oh wow, this is like, there's some momentum building, and that's always really, really encouraging.
Yeah, absolutely. I've gotten good feedback. I made a personal post on Facebook yesterday, kind of recapping the experience, but even more than that, kind of just unpacking the last 15 years of my life that led to kind of the freedom in my journey, my faith journey, to even be able to be a part of a service that was at a brewery that was inclusive to everyone. And so I shared that. And when you do that, you always run the risk of, you know, I don't want to say haters, but people who very strongly disagree with some of your positions. And one of the things that
people disagree with people on social media.
I know, it's crazy, man. It's crazy. And believe it or not, they can actually be snarky sometimes.
What? No.
So what's interesting is, I made a post some point last year talking about, you know, Meizon being inclusive, and especially in terms of gender and sexuality. And that's kind of big news in church world. And I was really surprised at how little, not pushback, but even the people who messaged me and said, hey, I don't agree with you. I'm very fortunate. These people have not been nasty, you know? And so even with this, it was just overwhelmingly positive, and private messages and people wanting to kind of hear more and hear about that. I got invited to be on a podcast. I
saw that.
You know?
That was awesome.
Like,
yeah.
So, and no kidding, somebody called and was like, this is so awesome. We hate that we missed it. And they said, how much does it cost to like rent the place, do all the stuff? And I told them the number, right? It's like pretty close to $1,000. And they're like, done. Like, I'm sending the check.
That's awesome.
Like, so good. So the feedback, you know, has been overwhelmingly positive. So we're not going to stay here forever, but do you have like a favorite moment from the night?
Honestly, well, so like in the night, it's very hard for me to be present in the moment. I know that sounds horrible as a worship guy, but it's like there's so many things going on in my head, and a lot of you guys don't know, but there's like click tracks and all kinds of stuff in my in-ears and all these things happening, and so I'm usually pretty distracted the night of. But then afterwards, like I edit the video, and sometimes when I edit the video, that's when it hits me. Like that's when some of the stuff like kind of like really gets heavy in my heart. And I think it was just the moment when we were having communion, and like, and you have said this before, but it's sort of a mess.
It's totally
it's
a
total
mess.
chaos because like we've got all the families in the room and we invite the kids to come up to get the elements and bring them back to their families. And so you see this sort of mad dash from all the kids trying to come up and get their communion elements, and it's loud and it's just sort of, it's chaos, right?
It is.
But like, it's really beautiful. Like it really is. I can't explain it any other way, but it's like when you watch it, it's just super powerful because it makes me think about what it must have been like, you know, in those first church meetings when people gathered together and they broke bread together. It was informal and they were meeting in homes, and it wasn't, I don't think it was this like really clean programmed thing. Like,
I don't think they had like a harpist with like the mood music even in the background.
Yeah. And just the excitement and the eagerness of some people to just be able to take those elements and to be together and to share that meal together. I don't know. It's just very, it was very powerful to me.
Yeah, man, you totally jacked my favorite moment too.
Sorry.
No, but I'm glad, right? Because I think it's really neat that this messy moment in our service that is so like solemn. And I mean, everywhere I've been in ministry like 22 years, and it's always this like choreographed kind of dance, and it's quiet. You know, there's nothing wrong with that.
Sure.
But just opening up the floodgates and seeing these kids come down. So I actually have this perspective that nobody else in the room has, because I'm the one standing behind the table kind of managing this chaos, making sure like every family gets some bread, some juice. And my buddy's son came down and like he saw the bread, right? Like you went all out, you got the Hawaiian rolls. And he's like, this isn't bread. These are the best rolls, you know? And he's like,
they are though.
I know they are. And he's like, I want more, you know? And so like, I'm like, that is so awesome. And then you have like, the siblings, right? Like this is where it gets messy because, you know how kids fight over everything. And so you can tell that they've made an agreement when they're coming down the center aisle to get the elements. One of them's going to get the roll.
Right.
One of them's going to get the cup. And so this,
distributed evenly.
It's so funny, man. This one, sibling, they came up, it was a brother and a sister, and, he got the bread and she got the cup, right? And then they're supposed to turn and go around. And you could tell that the older one they had the deal. Right. But then the younger one grabs a second cup. And just like the look of just pure annoyment, you know, it's you didn't do it right. You know, so we have those moments, but then it is, you know, as they take them back and the families are breaking this bread together. And this came about because of necessity, right? Like it just doesn't feel safe to have a bunch of fingers like in a common cup right now with COVID exploding. And so we kind of stumbled upon this accidental, beautiful mess of a moment in our services. And I love it. I love it. I mean, the worship was beautiful and the flow, you know, for a first service, things went really well, but good. There's that moment like right in the middle of it.
The not programmed, not controlled, not like that's the moment that we're all like,
right.
Well, one of the things too, I'm gonna kind of pivot a little bit.
Sure.
But you know, you and I have talked a lot about like, you know, sermon series and trying to figure out like, you know, planning ahead and how are we going to do our schedule and teaching and house churches and things like that. And one of the things you and I we keep coming back to this church calendar thing. Right. Because there is a rhythm, at least for half the year, there's this sort of rhythm that has sort of been traditionally happening for 2,000 years in the church. And it's really good.
Oh, yeah.
You know, but a lot of people, because we've, you know, over time we've discarded things or thrown the baby out with the bathwater when things pivot and reformations and changes and all these things. But like, there's some things that we uncover when we kind of find these old traditions, and the church calendar has been one of them. And so we're starting a new series, and you can tell people a little bit about the series that we started this last week. But it's really based on this church calendar thing.
Yeah, church calendar. I'll give you like the 1 minute rundown on that. You know, many people have heard of Advent, and that's the beginning of the church year. That's like the New Year's for the church calendar, and it's these Sundays, these 4 Sundays leading up to Christmas, and it's hopeful anticipation, right? Is what that season is all about, and it's somewhat been hijacked by culture with these little calendars and stuff. But I kind of like that it's out there. At least people know what it is, you know.
Yeah, for sure.
So then you get to Christmas, and this is the one that like nobody really does. There's a Christmas season. It's 12 days, right, of like Christmas celebration. We're so good at the one day, but like extending something out to a season, we're not so great at. Well, then you have the Epiphany, the arriving of Christ. Like it's this aha moment, really, where Jesus is revealed to the world, and that he is more than a carpenter's son, you know. And so we're in this season now, and this is like roughly 8 Sundays where we'll be looking at this revealing of who Jesus is and what he was about, which will lead us to Lent, which is another one a lot of people have heard about. It begins on Ash Wednesday. It's really a season of like confession. It's marked by fasting, and so it's 40 days, but you don't count the Sundays, so it's actually like 47 days, you know, and that's where it gets tricky. And then you have Easter. It leads to Easter, and then people don't realize this either. There's this thing called Eastertide. It is a season of Easter that lasts 50 days until Pentecost, and which is the birth of the church. And then after that, you move into ordinary time, which kind of goes all the way back up until you start Advent over again. So that may be too much, but that's it. That's what it is. And so even churches that follow Christian calendar through all of those seasons, sometimes during ordinary time, that's when they'll break off and maybe do some like felt need series, you know, just some what's happening in the culture kind of things. And so I told you last year, like, I'm really ready to kind of dig back into Christian calendar because I did that for almost 7 years. And then last year, it felt like a lot of what we were doing was trying to cast vision and create an understanding of what Meizon Mission was and was all about. And I told you, I was like, dude, I'm ready to get back to Jesus. I'm ready to get back to the scripture. So we started Epiphany, and it started with Jesus' baptism, right? And I shared that just really always kind of bothered me because the baptism that he participated in was his cousin, John the Baptist, was out in the wilderness, you know, like doing this kind of Bible thumping revival. In my mind, that's what this is, you know, and he's preaching this people that need baptism for the repentance of sin. You know, it's a baptism of repentance for the forgiveness of sins. And I'm like, well, Jesus doesn't need to be there, you know? And then we talked through what this was for the early church. Was there was so much stuff going in there that pointed to earlier parts of the story that just revealed, like, this is new creation. Right. This is rescue. Like, this is the guy, like, he's worth following, you know? And then I kind of had an epiphany, like riding in my car after a soccer game late in the week last week that, like, why was Jesus in that water? At the end of the day, he was in the water because he chose to be there.
That's right.
He chose to be there in the middle of the mess. He didn't have to be there. And it was almost like he was tipping his hand saying, guess what? Yeah. You're going to find me in all the wrong places with all the wrong people. So get used to it, right? So that's what we did last week. That's how we introduced the series of Epiphany. And these passages, like, we don't pick them, right? Like they're already kind of set for us. And so that's kind of a beauty of it as well, as we end up tackling some passages that maybe we would skip over because they aren't easy or convenient.
They're not the ones we chose.
Right. So we're moving into a second story this week, and it reminds me. So this, I was sitting in another soccer game. There's a theme here. A few weeks ago, and I was telling one of the soccer dads that I was like, "Yeah, man, our church is going to meet in a brewery." He's like, "That's crazy," you know. He's like, "So can I come and like buy a beer and come in?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, what if I start heckling you?" I was like, "Well, we'll just see how that plays out," you know. But he was telling me about this wedding that he went to. I can't remember if it was his wedding or just one that he attended, but he was there one way or another. And he said that they had an open wine bar before the wedding started. Mm-hmm. And I don't know what happened, if like it was delayed, but the attendees went through 40 bottles of wine before the wedding even started, right? And he said it was the most raucous wedding. Like, people were like cheering and whooping and like clapping. And they had to send somebody out like during the ceremony to go replenish because that was all the wine for the whole day, right? And they were like, they drank it all before the wedding even started. And so like it ties so perfectly into this story that we're looking at today, the wedding at Cana, or Jesus' first miracle of turning water into wine. So
we didn't really talk about how we were going to talk about this,
right?
Other than we were going to talk about it. And so like for me, it's like there's so many different dimensions to the wedding at Cana story,
right?
You know, because you have sort of like Jesus and his mother having these kind of side conversations about, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah, tell them the story. Like, what is the what is the story?
So from my memory, because I wanted to read it this morning, I did.
I read it yesterday, so if you missed something, I'll try to fill in some gaps.
So if you missed something, you can fill it in. But basically, the premise is that Jesus is at this wedding.
Yep.
His mother's there with him.
Oh yeah.
It's a party.
Yeah, it's
I mean, it's lit. Everything's going on, and what happens is they run out of wine.
Yes.
And Jesus' mother knows.
Yeah, she notices it.
She notices that they're going to run out of wine, and this is not going to be good.
Yep.
And so she pulls Jesus aside and says, "Hey, I know you can fix this problem that we're about to have."
Yep.
And he's like hesitant. He's like, I don't know if this is really the time for me to be doing this.
Yep.
But he does it anyways.
Yeah.
And not only does he changes water into wine.
Right.
They bring out the wine, and not only do they have wine to continue the party, but it's the best wine of the day. Right. Yeah. So, hopefully I got it all.
No, you pretty much got it all. Basically, Jesus does look at his mom, and he's like, "Mom, this isn't your problem. This isn't my problem." And then she turns to the servants and says, "Do whatever he tells you."
Right. She's hip to it. She knows. This is the thing about the story I love is like she's the ultimate mom in this story, right? Because like mom knows.
Yeah.
Mom always knows. Like she always knows what's up before it's going to go down.
Right. And Jesus was basically saying like, my time has not yet come, you know, and I want to speak to that like kind of at the very end today. But so what Jesus does is it's kind of scandalous. They have these ceremonial hand washing jars. You know, you think of a jar, these things held like 20 to 30 gallons, and they were clay pots, right? And so that they could be ceremonially pure, they would, they were used to pour out water for hand washing. So he tells these servants, like, go fill these 6 stone things with water. So it was somewhere between 120, 180 gallons of water, right? Which I can't imagine was even an easy task.
Well, you got to think about how they got water back then.
That's what I'm saying.
It wasn't like they turned the water faucet on. They had to go fetch it.
They had to go get it, right? And water's heavy, like roughly 8 pounds for like a gallon. So they do this, and so basically they fill these things, and then Jesus says, "Yeah, get the pitcher, fill it, and basically take it to the master of ceremonies." And they're thinking they're just taking this guy water.
Right.
Right, which is no bueno, because water isn't good back then. That's why they drank wine, is because the water could jack your stomach up. Right. Well, that's when he drinks it, and he begins to declare to the bridegroom, "This is amazing." Like most weddings.
Why were you holding out on us?
Why were you holding us out? Because usually people serve the best stuff first and then use the cheap wine. And you have saved the best for last, Yep. So, yeah, there's a lot going on in this. But where do you want to jump in?
Well, I just, for me, I think part of the story that a lot of people miss is the fact that Jesus loves a party.
Right.
Right. Like, I think like sometimes we just think like, there's sort of this old, tired sort of narrative about how church is boring and God is boring and he just wants you to, what's the Billy Joel song? Only the good die young, right? It's like I gotta everything's boring and you have to have some excitement, but all the excitement is sinful and wrong. And so we're not going to do anything good. We're just going to be reverent and quiet and, let God be God, and we're going to be quiet. And I think that this story is like this different dimension of Christianity, or just even like God, because like God loves a party, and he's at the party, and not only does he love a party, but he wants the party to continue. Like it's and that is sort of a different dimension of God than we're used to.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I grew up in like the sanctuary where it was like kids don't run in church.
Right.
Like there are places to have fun and there are places to have a good time. this is not one of them.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, go outside the church if you're going to have a good time. And, I mean, that's a very literal, concrete thing. But I'm going to be honest that stuff can creep into your psyche a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, as a little kid, you're like, oh, this isn't the place that we're going to have fun at all. And, one of our philosophies, even for our children's ministry at Meizon Mission, is that it is fun. Fun isn't the number one thing, but if we aren't having fun teaching kids about the good news of Jesus, we're doing it wrong, right? And so, man, I want to flip those tables, and turn the tables and just say, no, like this is a place that's going to be fun, like we're going to laugh. Like I want there to be humor, like in our services, at times.
I used to love like when me and my wife lived in Nashville for a season, and there was a church that we went to there, and one of the things that they did, and it bothered me at first, and it took me a long time to warm up. But after church, they would let the kids out of kids' church, and they would come upstairs, and they would just let them run around. Yeah. Like they'd just run around the room and they'd have a blast. These kids would have so much fun just chasing each other around. And,
like during church?
Well, church was ending. Like it was as church was kind of wrapping up at the end, and like people were kind of walking out, like we'd let the kids run around. And I remember staying late talking to people and just letting the kids run around.
Right.
And they had a great time. But I remember the first few times being like, is this okay? Like, are we allowed to do that? Like, I don't know. Right. But I'm so glad that we did that, because my kids now are older, and I know that they had that experience growing up. Like, I know for them growing up, they grew up with a church experience that wasn't like, church is boring, or I wasn't allowed to have fun there. They actually grew up with an experience where like church was fun.
Yeah. I think my kids have done the same. I think we drew the line, like you can't be like jumping over the rows of chairs.
Right. Yeah.
Like we drew the line
safety. Safety is a thing. Yeah.
We drew the line at chaos. I think we drew the line at chaos. Looking at this story, I love a good story, and I love a good human story. And there's so much humanness in this story, like especially with Jesus. He's the God man. He's 100% man, 100% God at the same time. But I love this exchange between Jesus and his mother, because we have these kind of exchanges like in my home between my son and his mother, or even my son and his father. These moments where like mom and dad want the kid to do something, and the kid's really not into it. And then sometimes you just do the parent thing, and you just kind of tell the kid what they're going to do. And you totally have that here. Jesus totally pleads his case. He's like, I've pegged Mary as an Enneagram 2, like helper, like she sees, somebody needs to fix that. Somebody needs to do, and Jesus is kind of like, the Enneagram 5. He's like, not my problem. Like I'm not into this. And so I love that humanness. I love that back and forth. And then the fact that she basically hears what he says and ignores him, and then looks at the servant and says, do whatever he tells you to do, and then we have this story. We have this story. And then you have the servants, you have the master of ceremonies, you have the bridegroom that's on the verge of just being embarrassed, for running out of wine, because they party for like 7 days, man. These weddings weren't a one-night event. It was like a 7-day ordeal. It was like, think of a music festival, you like go and camp out. And this thing is, they knew how to throw down, back in the day. And so they were running out. And, that's just a really, really neat human story.
Yeah, I think that going back to the, Mary and Jesus, like I do think there is this sort of element of like mom knows, like our parent, like my mom, like she could read the room better than anybody.
Oh yeah.
Like if she walked in and me and my brothers and my sister were doing something, she knew. She knew everything. Like there was no getting around her. And I love the fact that she sees what needs to happen bigger than she sees what her son says to her. Like it wasn't like she was she ignored him, but it's like, I get that, but there's something bigger here going on. And the fact that Jesus honors his mother.
Right.
Like he honors the desire that his mother has over his, and that shows his humanity, because his humanity is like, I'm not ready to reveal this yet. I don't want to get into this, because as soon as that door gets, because he knows as soon as that door opens, as soon as people know that I'm that guy, it's the clock starts ticking on him.
Well, Rome's going to come after him, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So he knows. So he's in his humanness. He's like, he's hesitating.
Yes.
And Mary's like, no, I think you should do this. And then like by her telling those guys like, hey, do whatever he tells you, I think it just sort of opens the door where he's like, okay,
right,
okay, I'll do this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's good.
No,
I love it.
It's totally
I love
good.
it.
Yeah, I think this story also reveals like the generous heart of God. Mm-hmm. You're either have an abundance mindset or you have a scarcity mindset. Like I've realized that in business this last year, that there are certain people in town that do the same thing that I do, that have the same business, and they have an abundance mindset. They're like, there is plenty to go around, and they will be generous with giving leads or helping solve a problem. There are others that you bump into and you try to have these conversations about, hey, if I ever need to help with a roof wash or something, they basically just like, you can tell they totally are like, no, like they want to own the town. They don't have room, and so you meet these people. Some just kind of have a generous spirit, and some are like, oh, there's not enough, and there's plenty. Like even in this story, we see this abundance heart of God, this generous heart of God who, he doesn't give them a little more wine. Like,
right.
He like over the top.
Yep.
So yeah, pretty neat. Toward the end of that passage, it talks about how this was the first sign. And it even says that it was the first glimpse of his glory, and that as a result, his disciples believed, or his disciples trusted in him. And so there was some very just poignant stuff that happened through this. Like this was a moment where his disciples are like, they're following him, but I think some of them probably had to be like, is it really the guy? Is it really the guy? I mean, They've been waiting 400 years for their rescuer. Is he it? And so it says that like when this happened, like the disciples believed, and there's this conversation that happens just in the chapter before this between Jesus and Nathaniel. And Nathaniel basically declares, he's like, you are the Son of God, because like he tells him that he saw him like sitting under a tree, and he does a Jesus thing. And Jesus basically says, oh, you have seen nothing yet. Like before this is over, he says something along the lines of, you will see the heavens split and the angels descending and ascending back. And to us, that doesn't make a lot of sense, but to those folks, it did. What it was saying is the kingdom of heaven is invading earth. Right. Like the kingdom of God is at hand. And so that literally happens, that conversation happens 3 days before this happens. And so this is really kind of one of those first moments when the kingdom of heaven, the kingdom of God is seen, like right here on earth. May your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. And like, that's what's going on here. And this is like the revealing part of this story is through Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, we have these moments where heaven and earth aren't separated anymore. We call those like thin spaces, where like, it seems like if you've ever been in a moment where it's like, wow, heaven feels like it's like right here. Yeah. Wherever Jesus went, it was basically happening. And so like all these places that he traveled and these things that he did, it was this moment where the kingdom of God was like being started here on earth. And this is, it gets kicked off like right here in this story. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. I love just like what you're saying, the goodness, the generosity, the just the lavishness of God's heart for the people in the story is so good, right? Because it's like, he's literally pouring out wine, pouring out goodness, pouring out joy, excitement, it's really, really, really cool.
Yeah, no, it's good, and this is a fun passage.
It is,
to kind of be able to dig into. I always like when it rolls back around in the Christian calendar to get to explore it. It's really
There's
good.
always more to discover too. I think that's one of the things when we do uncover these stories. It's like you read a story, you know the story. It's like, okay, yeah, close the book or whatever. But I think revisiting these stories that are really familiar to us and doing sort of these little deeper dives are really helpful, at least to me, because there's always something else. Like there's always some other dimension to the story, or always some other perspective, or something maybe I missed, or maybe, I read, somebody wrote some commentary on it that like just totally flips the story a little bit on its side for me. And it makes it feel fresh. It makes it feel new. It makes it feel like there's some new life being breathed into these old stories. And they really become alive to me.
No, I agree. And I worry a little bit because I'm kind of in this phase where, not a shameless plug, but just a plug for the guys at the Bible Project who have been doing some of these deeper dives and providing a way for those of us who have been reading the Bible for a long time to dig in and see some different patterns and see some different depth, and so I have to be kind of careful not to nerd out on that stuff. Like when I'm communicating, I did a little bit of it Sunday. I was like, maybe it was a little too much, but but it's really cool because it's like we can begin to kind of get into the minds of the folks who originally heard this, like the early church, the people who were there for these things, and like what all of this nuance was communicating to them is huge. Like it's huge, and it brings it even more alive to see really just how sophisticated a lot of this writing was, because it's like pointing back to the people who are in the know. So this was good.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate this conversation. I appreciate us taking some time. I know we kind of have talked about doing more conversations like this instead of them being like, a full-on teaching or a sermon. And I just love having conversations and asking questions and getting into these things. So hopefully we can do more of this in the new year. That's kind of my hope. And then, we'll be doing the Meizon Lives once a month. I guess we can just go through some of that calendar stuff with people. Sure. So our next, what's the date of the next one? Is it the 8th? Is it February 6th? February 6th.
Yep.
So Sunday, February 6th, we're going to be at Cypress and Grove Brewing again, 5 p.m. for Meizon Live. So definitely come out if you're able to. The food trucks will be there. You can grab a drink afterwards, hang out with us afterwards. It'd be great. We've got house churches you can get involved in. You can get plugged into a house church. We have a Connect card that I'll show on the screen here in a minute. But if you scan the QR code, you can fill out the Connect card and just tell us that you're interested in joining a house church, and we will get you plugged in. House churches meet on Sunday evenings, on the weeks when we don't have Meizon Live, and on the other weeks. So we try to do it at least twice a month. We try to have a house church meeting.
And that's basically where you watch a 10, 15-minute teaching together. You have some discussion about it, communion with the kids, still a mess, pray together. And it's really good. It's a way to build community even more than showing up to the brewery, which is a great first step, right? Yeah. Like if you want to check us out, it's a little less intimidating to attend that than it is to walk through the door, front door of a stranger.
Yeah, and there's other opportunities too. If you guys want to help out, we definitely need help with Meizon Live. If you want to join one of our hospitality teams or our setup teams or worship team or our tech team, we have tons of opportunities for people to get plugged in. If that stuff is stuff that you're interested in, reach out to us. We would love to have you. The other thing is we've got a couple opportunities for people to serve in our community. So we've got Family Promise. Yep. We are making some meals for we're partnering with Temple Shir Shalom again.
And maybe another smaller church. I can't remember.
And so we're partnering with them. We're making some meals for Family Promise. These are families that are coming out of homelessness. Yep. And so we're just kind of, just for this 1 week, we're going to be supplying some meals for them. And then on January...
And by we mean like individual families within Meizon. Like you and I ain't cooking the meals, dude. Like, right. We have a sign-up sheet for you to help with this. And when you help with this, then it becomes we did it. Do you know?
Right. No, that's good. So yeah, so if you are an individual or a family who would like to make a meal for a family for Family Promise, sign up because we definitely need that.
Yeah.
The last thing I'll say is on January 30th, which is a Sunday, that morning, our friends at Shift Church are moving. They're moving out of Celebration Point Theater, and they're moving into their new building, which is on Newberry Road. And so that morning, we're going to be going over and helping them move some equipment and move some of their stuff into their new space. And so if you're available that morning to help, it would be awesome to have you there. I'm going to be there in the middle of the day helping set up their new sound system and stuff. So there's going to be stuff to do all morning and into the afternoon. So if you can stop by, it'd be really great to see you there. And it'd be great to get to know these guys because they're another faith community here in town that's doing similar things that we're doing, and we like friends, and so we want to build friendships and inroads with people who are moving in the same places that we are. So
very cool. Well, we are Meizon Mission, an inclusive faith community committed to creating greater spaces for people to hear and experience the good news of Jesus. We'll see you next time.